Welcome to the second Trans-Tasman workshop on fish screening. There was a first, you'll hear about that. What is Fish Screens Australia? Thanks for sponsoring Fish Screens Australia. If you want to know, there's a stall out there, there's a website. Go speak to them, you can find out what it's all about. But it's basically a group of like-minded agencies working together to promote the implementation of modern fish protection screening in Australia. I just want to shout out those partners up there. Also, agencies like the New South Wales Rec Fishing Trust, the Ian Potter Foundation, that really kick-started Fish Screens Australia, and now more recently, the FRDC that's supporting the work that we do. I just want to shout out and thank my co-chairs for this session from New South Wales DPIRD, Tom and Rod, and from NIWA in New Zealand, Mike Hickford. So my job is basically, not to really give a talk, but to give a bit of an introduction to the session, because it sort of felt like it needed an introduction. And so what I'm going to tell you a bit about, I suppose, firstly, what is the issue and what is a modern fish screen. So we all know that we divert a lot of water from our rivers. So I think in Australia, the figures are thrown around. Upwards of 80% of surface flows are diverted from rivers. You can see there just some data from New South Wales alone that shows the licences that are active in New South Wales. A huge amount, tens of thousands. 4,500 pumps across New South Wales divert water from our rivers. If we head over to New Zealand, very similar issues. This is a map of New Zealand from one of Mike's reports. About 50% of water diverted from consents, they call them, not licences, in New Zealand for agriculture. And in the last 2 decades alone, over a 90% increase in the level of water that's diverted, particularly on the drier east coast of New Zealand, where there's a lot of agriculture going on. We know that when you divert that amount of water, fish go with it. So there's a lot of contemporary research that's been done on that, both in Australia but also globally. We know we lose large amounts of fish. Pumps anywhere from 3.5 fish per meg, but as high as 700, 750 fish per meg. Hutcho's going to tell us today about some of the entrainment rates up in Queensland, so will Thomas Malloy. Gravity-fed diversions, a lot more. We're talking about in the millions of fish that have been diverted from rivers. We've got evidence coming through from studies that were done through Victoria and New South Wales. It's going to vary from time to time and diversion to diversion, but what we do know is it's a huge number of fish. So when you look at the cumulative effect across all these diversions, we're not talking hundreds, we're not talking thousands. This is New South Wales pump data alone. We did a review of the contemporary literature and the results, and we estimate, just using that 3.5 conservative estimate, that we're losing close to 100 million native fish from our rivers every year just in New South Wales at pumps. Okay, and that's a lot. Those losses, they're concerning for us as a fisheries agency because they compromise biodiversity of our rivers, they compromise our abilities to restore and rehabilitate our rivers, and they compromise people's ability to go out and catch fish as well. Is it a contemporary issue? It sure isn't. So we went back through Trove and we found evidence going back mentioning the losses back in as early as the 1920s. So Murray-Darling Basin, we started about industrial agriculture and irrigation in about the 1880s. So it wasn't too far after that, then we were starting to see reports of the massive losses. So this story from the 1940s was of the head of fisheries going down and meeting with irrigators and fishers to talk about the millions of Murray cod that were getting caught in irrigation diversions off the Murrumbidgee. So many fish were being lost. I'm talking about, what are the solutions? Do we put fisheries officers on there constantly to rescue these fish, or do we actually use these canals as hatcheries? They did neither. But we still today do fish rescues out of irrigation ditches. It was through the native fish strategy we started to develop some more contemporary evidence and data around these losses. Some of this started to really reach the consciousness of fisheries scientists. A lot of data coming out of and evidence coming out of Victoria and New South Wales, and it was probably the turn of about 2012 where we started having a call for action on how we could address these losses through modern fish protection screens. Because the issue, if we back up, is that most of these diversions are either unscreened or they use ineffective screens. They've got trash racks, bars, mesh, and these are poor performers from a fish protection and a debris control perspective. The velocities are too high, the mesh is too big, so we lose that large, significant number of native fish from our rivers. With it goes sticks, gum nuts, all sorts of vegetation, and crud that gets in and causes headaches for farmers. So that is a bit of a conceptual model of what it does, and basically all a screen does, a modern fish protection screen, is it changes the hydraulics in front of the screen face. So instead of about 3 to 5 metres per second velocity in front of that pipe, these screens are finer mesh, often about 2 to 3 mil, but can go down to 50 microns, some of the screens that we put in, so small you can't see the holes. And the surface area is a hell of a lot bigger, so because of that, that velocity spread across the screen face, so at any point on that screen, you can't feel the suction, so that velocity is reduced down to about 0.1 metres a second. Fish can swim very close to it. Leaves, debris don't get stuck against it, and it does that and still allows a farmer to deliver the same amount of water at the same rate. Screens come in many different types: brushed, airburst, water cleaned, cylinders, half cylinders, horizontal flat screens, vertical screens. It really is a case of screens for streams as it is horses for courses. It's a global issue. It's not just an Australian issue, so there's a lot we can learn from around the world. So this is the United States. They've been screening for close to a century, and it's why we've done a couple of trips over to the United States over the years to learn from what they're doing. This is the Aussie cultural attaché we sent over there. We learn a lot, and we can learn a lot because there's a lot of commonalities, and but we do have our differences as well. We came back and with a plan to screen in southeastern Australia, and it would be fair to say that it's been a bit of a slow burn, a slow awakening. Tom and I call it awakening the sleeping giant of river restoration. These are screening talks that were given at ASFB, and it's sort of a good metaphor for how the awareness has built over the years. Everyone knows that I've attended conferences and crap on about screening, and I've been a lone voice. So we hit a heady high back here in Sydney where we had 2 talks with Les Perkins coming over from the United States and telling us about screening. Hamilton actually, I remember Matt, we met in Hamilton. Where are you, Matt? I was like a filthy little screen junkie going down to the car park, and he pops his boot and he had a screen in the back, and that's when we were trying to sort of figure out what some of the solutions may be. But you have a look now, and on the Gold Coast we had 5 talks on screening at ASFB. I didn't give one of them. And then in Auckland we had our first Trans-Tasman workshop that came off the back of a ASFB conference. We had 6 talks from Australia and New Zealand, and here we are today, a special session just on screen. So it fills my heart with joy. So last year we did go and visit the Kiwis. We did learn a lot, and we met at Niwa with fishers, farmers, screen practitioners, and scientists to hold our first Trans-Tasman workshop, because there's a lot that New Zealand's been screening for decades, more than we have, and there's a lot to learn from what not to do as well as what to do. And there's a lot we can learn together because we take different approaches. So we had a a bit of a whiteboarding session, and some of the things we came up with, we asked the question, how can we get more screens in rivers? Things like, how do we focus on just not getting targeted non-natives like trout? How do we protect all native fish? How do we ensure that designs are feasible so that they protect fish, but they're actually affordable to put in as well? We need to ensure that we have collaboration. We have fishers working with engineers, working with farmers from the start. And we need to use social license as a driver to help leverage the uptake of screens. These are issues that we share commonly between our countries, and we recognise that we actually do have an engineering knowledge gap in both countries that we need to address through things like engineering masterclasses where we can bring biologists and engineers together. So today, we're going to keep that dialogue going, and we're going to see talks on strategic implementation. Like we're going to hear from Rob Price and Thomas Malloy and Hutcho's they're going to talk us about opportunities that they see in Queensland. Rod's going to talk about what we've been doing in New South Wales. Tom's going to talk about the strategy to move screening forward in New South Wales. We're going to hear about screen design talks. We've got Pat talking about hydraulics. We've got Joachim and Mike both talking about fish behaviour in front of screens. And we've got Boyd talking about the economics. So it's not just about the biophysical nature of screens, it's about the economics and driving uptake. And we're going to hear from the engineers. We're going to hear from Matt and we're going to hear from Pete about some of the considerations with screen design. So, with that in mind, welcome to the second Trans-Tasman workshop. It isn't as much of a workshop as in the traditional sense, but we will have 15 minutes at the end of the day for some discussion.